Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever in the world you happen to find yourself. My name is Carmen Mazzara, and I serve as Executive Director of the Coalition for American Public Diplomacy and Leadership, or CAPDL, as you all know it. I'm so glad to have you all here today to join us for what I know is going to be a great conversation, particularly because part of what makes our work distinct, what makes the J1 visa distinct, is this element of cultural exchange. So I'm really excited to hear from so many different perspectives. And I invite all of you as we go through the conversation to share your insights, to share your questions, to share your successes and your challenges in the chat. And particularly if you have good ideas to share, please do put them in the chat. I know we will all benefit from them as we go through. I'm going to briefly introduce each of our speakers. Then I have some questions for them, and then we'll have the chance to open up the floor and let you ask our speakers questions as well. If you do have technical issues as we go through, please feel free to send me a direct message, and I will do my best to take care of that. This session will be posted on the CAPDL YouTube page along with many of our other past sessions, and I will have our standard handout of key takeaways for you by the end of today. It should be in the member resources section, and hopefully all of you get my regular Friday emails as well, and the link will be in there as well. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, particularly around the Friday email, send me a direct message about that as well, and we'll make sure that it's getting through all of your spam filters. So, welcome again, everyone. Very glad to see all of you here for this session. We have three amazing speakers. I'm not going to do their bios justice by any stretch of the imagination, but I want to give you a brief introduction to each of our great panelists here today. First, Denise Beckson has been a cornerstone at Morey's Piers, which many of you may know in Wildwood, New Jersey, for over 2 decades. In addition to her work at 3 amusement parks, 2 beachfront water parks, 4 hotels, restaurants, golf courses, and other businesses connected to Morey's Piers, she has the time somehow to contribute a lot on the local, state, and international levels to the hospitality and attraction industries. She is currently the chair of the New Jersey Restaurant and Hospitality Association Board, a trustee at the New Jersey Business and Industry Association, a board member at the New Jersey Amusement Park Association, the New Jersey Tourism Industry Association, and she serves on the workforce development boards in Cumberland, Salem, and Cape May counties. In addition to all of that, on the state and local level, on the international level, she's very active with the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions, which many of you may know as IAPA. She's there as the chair of the North American Regional Advisory Board. She's a member of the Executive Finance Committee. She's been chair of their Global Government Relations Committee, Global Education Committee, and Global Water Park Committee. She's also, nearest and dearest, of course, to my heart, an active member of the board of directors at CAPDL. What I appreciate about Denise is that she talks about her demonstrated and steadfast commitment to excellence, leadership, and advocacy within the tourism, hospitality, and amusement industries. And we see this throughout all of the work that she's done in her service, in her public speaking, and in her everyday work at Morey's Piers. We're also joined by Heather Haapapuro, which hopefully I didn't butcher too badly, who lives just outside of Memphis, Tennessee, and has been a host parent for BridgeUSA participants since 2016. Over the years, she has hosted 16 exchange students from 12 different countries, recently sending home 2 wonderful students from Spain and Brazil. And she and her family are gearing up to welcome 2 more, I'm sure, equally wonderful students from Mexico and Poland. Even when they moved from one state to another, she continued to host as part of what she calls her deep commitment to cultural exchange and global connection. So Heather, with you and your family, we're so glad to have that perspective represented as well, knowing that as a great complement and key part of what BridgeUSA brings. And last but not least, I'm excited to have an alum of the BridgeUSA program join us. Andrea Villasmil Lecaro, and again, hopefully I did that one right, is now a clinical psychologist and inclusive education consultant from Ecuador. She's dedicated to advancing neurodiversity and mental health awareness in North America. Currently, her work is as Chief Education Officer at LALAI, an education tech company that develops accessible, tech-driven solutions for autistic students, families, and educators. She's even written a book, a children's book, that introduces autism through empathy and storytelling. But she talks about how all of this in part got started during her Bridge USA program experience that ignited her commitment to cross-cultural collaboration, educational equity, and really shaped her mission to transform educational systems from within. So I'm so excited to have three wonderful panelists with distinct but complementary perspectives on this key piece of Bridge USA's work and the J1 visa's work. So after all of that, again, I'm going to jump in. I have some questions for our panelists, but as we go through, I invite you to put your questions in the chat, as well as great examples that you might have of the work that you do from your roles. So to get started, we know that Bridge USA programs, J1 visas, are distinct because they combine work and study with this expectation for cultural exchange. I'm going to start with Denise, but I'm going to ask each of you, what are examples of your most successful cultural exchange activities? And maybe you might separate the ones that are most successful from the ones that were most popular with the participants that you have. So Denise, could you give us some great examples of the work that you've done?
Sure, sure. So are you defining success then not by popularity, but by real, true cultural exchange, learning something? Yeah. Okay. So I would say one of the activities that we've created that has a tremendous impact in terms of cultural exchange is called our professional series, where we have folks learn about how certain professions operate in the US and they can compare it to their home. So for instance, we go to a courtroom and they meet with a judge and they see court proceedings and they meet with the prosecutor and they understand and learn a little bit about the legal system and then can compare and contrast that to their home country. We do the same with medical, going to the hospital. We do it with EMS. We visit the fire station. We visit the police station. It's popular as well because they do get locked up and take some really great pictures behind bars. But they love it. I mean, it's an Instagram moment, Carmen. So it's fabulous. But there we do it with engineering. So we've picked five or six different professions that are common, that are attractive to our students to understand the differences. And so that has, I think, really gets in deep to how culture influences those professions and practices. And let me just also say thank you for inviting me to participate today. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I was getting embarrassed as you were going, but appreciate it. So, and really, I always love talking about the J1 program. So I'm happy to participate.
Thank you. And Heather, how about you as a host parent? What kinds of things have been successful for you?
I think you would have gotten different responses from me at different times throughout my hosting experience because I think my first couple of years, I was really excited to show them the things that I was excited about. So going to an NFL game or taking them to popular sightseeings when I lived in Wisconsin, taking them down to Chicago, those things excited me. But what I found after hosting for a couple of years, those aren't the exciting moments for international students. The exciting moments is getting them to ride the yellow school bus or for them to go to a high school where they change classes every single day. Or even that initial drive home as they're like, oh my goodness, it's just like the movies. And I'm looking out the window and I'm like, they're just brick houses or just houses with vinyl sidings. So it's the small day-to-day things that I think get me excited seeing them. I'll never forget, not last year, but the year before, I hosted my daughter from Ecuador. And when she came in, we gave her a house tour and we're showing her the bathroom and the kitchen. And as we go through the kitchen, we're showing, here's our pantry, here's our oven, here's our microwave, here's where the dishwasher is. And just her response to, what is a dishwasher? I've never heard that. And her making the funny joke of, yes, my family has a dishwasher too. It's called Pazita, which is her name. But seeing her get excited for the small things of how we live day-to-day life, seeing people so authentically excited for the things that we take for granted every single day.
That's great. Andrea, how about you as an exchange student? What kinds of things did you really appreciate and found most helpful for learning about the US?
Thank you, Carmen, for this invitation as well, and to be able to share the experience of my lived experience as an alumni of the program. And for me, it always comes back to the people. I think that more than the sightseeing and everything you get to experience at a traveling level, it's the people that you get to meet. And I was fortunate enough to work with people not only from the US, but from all over the world. So that really expanded my concept and also tapped into my own biases of what I probably thought someone from a certain country was like. And just by meeting them, I think that's the biggest cultural experience that you can have because it's no longer only what you read or what you see online, or as Heather said, what you see in the movies. It's what you really experience through the people that you meet. So I think that for me is always the most important aspect. It's about sharing culture with different people from different spaces.
That's great. And I love that it's planned activities like a visit to the law to courts or to the law firms. It's everyday things, and then it's just those everyday opportunities for human interaction. I'm curious, how did you decide, Heather, what activities to do with participants aside from those everyday things? And then how did you decide when you do them in the course of a busy day and a busy life?
It's all about expectations. I think that before students arrive, we always have them create a wish list, and we're really open with them on what's reasonable on their wish list and what's not reasonable on their wish list too. Because you'll be surprised at the variety of things that are put on there. And then we have a whole year to do it. I think also within that, you still live life. When you're hosting an international exchange student, they're here to experience day-to-day culture. They're not here to do big, exciting things. So I live in Memphis, Tennessee. That's nowhere near the ocean. So if I have a student saying, I want to go surfing every day, right, that's not reasonable, and that's not going to happen. But I also think sending them videos of what they can do when they're here and kind of guiding them to the different things that can happen in Memphis. Or previous to living in Memphis, I lived in a small town called Hortonville, Wisconsin, if anyone's ever heard of that before. But finding content of, okay, what is Hortonville? What is there to do there? And having them create what it is that they want to do. When it comes to when to do it, you'll have downtimes within your year. You're hosting them for 10 months. You're going to have those moments where it's like, hey, what do we do this weekend? And you do it. But also, what I've come to learn is their wish lists aren't typically unreasonable. Their wish lists are very, I want to go to a high school football game. We got one of those every Friday, right? Every Friday in fall. And it makes me excited because it's like, it's not a difficult ask or request. We can make things like that happen. Of course, it's a balance of working like with my husband and tag teaming it to see what is possible and when, but also surrounding yourself with a community and not just doing it alone, but who are their friends? Who are your friends that can help them make these dreams come true?
Thank you. Denise, with the summer work travel program, you have quite a different experience with participants. How do you decide what to do with them, and how do you decide when to do it?
Sure. So, we're hosting students. We have about 500 annually for 2 to 4 months. And so it's very condensed. And so we're doing cultural exchange and activities and events throughout, from the moment they get here until the moment that they leave, all different scale and size. And I think the way we approach all of the cultural activities, there's not one size fits all. So we have different offerings. We ask the students what they're interested in doing. We survey them each year. We try new things. We have some things that are sort of steadfast. For example, we do Thanksgiving every year in July, and that started because a student that I was working with had said he always saw Thanksgiving in the movies and never got to experience it, and he would love to experience it someday. And knowing he wouldn't be here in November, I said, well, we should have it this summer. So I had him over to my house and my family. We cooked Thanksgiving, and he had such a great time and talked about how moving it was for him to have that experience. So we said, how do we do this to scale? So now we've got turkey and mashed potatoes in July and football on the beach, and we're playing the Macy's Day Parade, as we're, experiencing that. And then we have the students talk about what they're thankful for. So, so again, through feedback things as large as that to things as small as, giving out information on 4th of July about what does it actually mean. It's not just fireworks and barbecues, but what's the origin of that. And we can do that through emails and postcards. And so it's really infusing it throughout the experience. It's not adjacent to, it is the reason for the experience. And it's really easy to work it and weave it in throughout their time here. And when we do it, like I said, all the time, but we do look at students' schedules and business needs and ensure that, we're able to mesh all that together.
Thank you. And I love that it's email as well as in-person activities as well as everyday things. To build on that a little bit, Denise, could you start by talking to a little bit about what kinds of resources do you need to commit in order to have these cultural exchange elements of Bridge USA? Time, money, buy-in from your colleagues, what does it really take to do this well?
Good question. I think all of the above that you just said, but it really doesn't have to be a ton of money. It really, you just need to be creative with thinking about ways, to have folks be able to exchange culture besides the workplace. I always want to remind people that's happening every day while they're working. They're working next to Americans. The participants are serving Americans, interacting with American customers. So that's just an integral part of the program. But then you're layering on something a bit more less organic, more programmatic. But it can be that the professional series that I mentioned, that doesn't have very high cost at all, just the transportation to get people there to the courthouse. The parties might be a little bit more, but they're part of our team building. We don't segregate our Bridge students from the rest of the population. We're doing that with everybody there. So it takes some planning, I would say, and we are generally trying to map this out before the season starts. And we are ensuring that, we're having things that meet. As I said, there's not a silver bullet to accomplish everything. So we're trying to have small group activities, big group activities, and we also organize trips that students can participate on. So they're visiting Washington, D.C., Boston, Niagara. So there's lots of ways to get at this.
And one last piece for you, I'm sorry, and then I'll turn it over to someone else. When do you start planning that calendar?
We start planning the calendar in the spring. It's especially with the bus trips, we've got to reserve transportation that takes a longer lead time. So the bigger the event, the longer the lead time. And we are just finalizing some of the activities that we're going to have now for July and August, some of the smaller ones. But the large stuff is already baked in there and ready to go. So some lead time is important. We are using, when I say we talk to students and what their interests are, it is generally from the year before, and then we're applying it to this year. But there are times in season someone mentions something and we're able to incorporate it into an in-service. Someone wants to know more about a particular American tradition, then that'll be our icebreaker for that in-service. So again, no cost, easy, addresses an interest or need that they have, and can be, put together pretty quickly.
That's great. And again, I invite our attendees, if you have great ideas for programs that you've done that you're really proud of, please put those in the chat too, and we will steal blatantly from you as we go. Heather, how about you as an individual family? What kinds of resources does it take for you to deliver on this aspect?
I think that it's from a host family standpoint, I feel as though the resources needed are pretty minimal because you're just living your day-to-day life. I like to say that it's the most simple, complicated thing that you'll ever do because you're welcoming a stranger into your home for 10 months, but you are just living life and pouring love into them like you would your own child. However, when you're hosting an international exchange student, because they're teenagers, you never know what curveball could be thrown at you, which is why our agency, along with every other agency for J1 students, there's a local coordinator that is assigned to you. So you can definitely bounce ideas off of them to be able to understand what's normal for them, what's not normal, or if you need additional support from the agency's standpoint, they can bring in those tools and resources, especially when it comes to setting expectations of what the student can and cannot do, or facilitating the emotions that come along with being in a country that's not their own. So I think the local coordinators are invaluable for this reason. Also the schools play a huge part. So they're high school students that are coming to our area. And of course, every school has a counselor or somebody in administration or a teacher. And those teachers, I think, always really value our exchange students and the perspectives that they bring to the table and to their classroom. So I think that they can almost be hidden resources in themselves just because they gravitate naturally to our students and also pour love into them.
That's great. And for folks who might have missed it, we just dropped a handout with 5 reasons high schools should host students. So hopefully you all can share that in your local communities too. Andrea, I'm curious, to as a participant, you had to also spend time and money and effort and resources to engage in cultural activities. How did you balance all of those competing components when you were a participant?
What a great question. So I'll go back 10 years ago to 2015, and I was 21 years old. So I think most of everything is just a lot of organization. I had an elementary teacher that said organization is half the battle, and I've just taken that to heart's sake. So I really used that, and knowing that I had a time where I needed to work, I also had a time where I could go explore. I could take some weekends off to go and travel. I went to Chicago actually as well. I was in Minnesota, so I could easily travel there. So I think it was a lot about organization. I think that's an advice that I would give students. It's really prioritize where you want to go. I also went to see a friend that lived in Wisconsin that I hadn't seen in 8 years. So it's about knowing what you want to do and then being able to organize that accordingly, both the resources that you have because you're earning your own money. So it's not about just going partying with that money, but like, do I want to save? Do I want to buy things for my family? Do I want to use this money to go travel and explore more of the United States? So I'd say it's organization, the primary thing.
Your teacher would be very proud that you're still quoting them this many this many years later. And that balancing act, I think, is really key because there are lots of competing interests that participants have, that business owners have. Denise, could you talk about how you think about the balance between time that students have to be doing the work that you need them to do and then doing the outside activities? And I take your point that there's a lot of overlap, but I think this is something that challenges people is this there's only so many hours in a day and how folks, business owners in particular, can approach that balance.
Right. Well, I think, one of the biggest things people experience when they come here, especially, many of the students, this is our first time, perhaps this far away from home, first time not living with their parents, maybe. So there's a lot of freedom of choice. And so we put a lot of activities out there, but we're not scorekeeping and we're not saying you have to do this or you have to do that. We're giving them choice with what they want to do with their free time. So, they work their scheduled shift, and then the activities that we have that are after hours, they can choose to participate or not participate. And many do. Some come to everything. Some really hone in on something that is important to them. But I think we don't prescribe it per se. And the activities are social. So it's not, I think many of them see it as not an extension of work, but a social activity. It just happens to be with the friends they have from work. So I don't think the time has to necessarily be that planned. It's just, okay, there's a party tonight for Thanksgiving, or on Saturday, there's a triathlon and we're going to be giving out the water and awards if you want to come. And, so we're kind of advertising those types of opportunities, and then people are deciding what they want to do.
I love that. And that's how Morey's lives in the community and then invites them in as well. Heather, how about you? Life is crazy. How do you find the ways with all of these competing interests?
When I was first thinking of this question, I was thinking about it from the student perspective of like how do they balance their study versus how do they balance their experience? And I think that when we think about our day-to-day lives, very rarely do us business professionals get done with work at 2:30, which is when school concludes here. So I think that we've just created a routine and a schedule that works for our family. Every family has a routine, whether they like to admit it or not, but you know what you do typically on Wednesday or typically on Saturday. So I think that very naturally it created its own its own balance. So our kids, they come home from school, they focus on their studies, get whatever studies they need to have done, and then the rest of the night is family time or time to do things, time to go out, to go to those football games. So I think that it's not something that we do knowingly. It's just from having a strong routine that sets our children up for success, whether they're an exchange student or not.
That's a very healthy attitude. I will need to get my life together as much as it sounds like you guys do. So I have one last question for our panelists, but then again, I invite all of you, please feel free to put your ideas and your questions in the chat. This is your time to pick the brains of our wonderful experts. And I'm curious to go back to something that Heather mentioned. How do you manage the expectations about what's possible? Not every student is going to get to surf every day. Not every student is going to get to go to Disney World. How do you manage those expectations? And then also, how do you manage the expectations of what the US is really like, right? The joys, the sorrows, the culture shock, and all of those kinds of components that are competing for headspace among participants as they go through this program. And Andrea, I'd be curious to start with you in your own experiences navigating that balance and then reflecting on it afterwards.
Hmm. That's very interesting. I think that expectations, I went more with curiosity than expectations to my experience. I did have an expectation that I wanted to go to a certain park, and then I ended up in another one. So that was like the first expectation that didn't get fulfilled. However, I was more curious to know what it was like to be there. I had never been to Minnesota. I wanted to see what that was like. So it was more about approaching it with a mindset of curiosity more than a mindset of expectation. And then now looking back, I was 21 at the time, now I'm 31, and I can see how that moment where I went to have an experience, a summer experience working at Valley Fair, and it has been instrumental in the rest of my life. So sometimes I think that you can't decipher what the expectations will be in that period, but then what happens afterwards. And it's actually what just going to this program that summer of 2015, then years later was my door to being able to apply to a grant from CIEE to publish my children's book about autism, which then sparked the rest of my career. So I think I would tell participants that it's not only about the experience that you have in that year or those months, but the doors that it opens for the rest of your life. So I think that it's more approaching it with curiosity because you really never know what's going to happen.
I love that. I love that. Denise, you've been nodding along. What would you say about expectation management and culture shock?
Yeah, I love that too. I wrote it down, curiosity mindset. So when we're recruiting overseas, I'm going to work that in because I think that that is the perfect way to look at it and to try to not have too many expectations, but to go into it with curiosity. And I think that will be a great tip for all of the BridgeUSA students to come. So I'll be using that. Thank you. In terms of expectations, we try to make sure that they align with reality as much as possible. And how we do that is, from the moment that we're meeting the students, the information we're giving them about the company, and then we're communicating along the way. We're sending out emails, every week or two that maybe pick 3 topics to really focus on and reiterate things that we shared when we were recruiting and having those conversations and interviews, but making sure to really emphasize and dig into them deeper. And then I think, so just really trying to lay all that out there. And then when it comes to culture shock, we advise students take it slow. Don't get here and you still have your suitcases and you're talking to us about a second job already. Like, get acclimated. Take time to get all of the things that you need to know learned. Where do I live? How do I get to work? Where is this in location to the grocery store? What do I do if there's an emergency? Take care of those basic life things. Don't come into it so immediately ready to get a second job or go on a trip your first week or whatever. Get acclimated to where you are. Learn the area a bit. We give them information on learning the area, a guidebook on where they can find things and resources, and and then have a bit of flexibility, I think, really, with what you might have expected and what it is, and try not to, I always say comparison is the thief of joy. Go with it, enjoy it, look for those moments. Don't say, well, I thought it was going to be this or that. Well, embrace what it is. And I'm going to use the curiosity mindset as well. So.
Gonna be the most quotable webinar we've done. I love this. Comparison is the thief of joy. Heather, how about you in balancing and culture and all those great things?
I think through hosting international exchange students, I've learned more about American culture, or just as much about American culture as I have other cultures. It's really challenged my mindset and really has gotten me out of my comfort zone. So, I would say, first and foremost, one thing that Americans generally do is we have something called the honeymoon period, where even though we know we're welcoming somebody to our home or our community, we want them to be happy. So we tend to like serve them and try and fulfill every single expectation that they have. And as I've hosted, I've realized that's unrealistic. And I'm making it harder on the person coming in because I'm not being honest, because I'm just trying to fulfill their happiness. So, what I've learned through myself is to try and skip the honeymoon period. And sometimes saying no is okay. They're expecting to hear the word no. They're expecting to understand that not all of their dreams are going to be fulfilled, and they'll understand what the point is of them actually coming on exchange is, right? So that's first and foremost. But then also, I think that I've learned that just because I grew up a certain way, or just because my culture is a certain way, doesn't mean that I have to be that way. So I think when students push back because they're teenagers, and they will, so when they ask me those questions of, but why? I actually consider their question. So I'm sure everyone on this call's mother at some point has said, because I said so. And I think it's really easy to say that. But when you're hosting an international exchange student, I think it presents a really good opportunity to take a step back and actually say, yeah, but why? Does this really matter? Is it going to fulfill an experience more so for them? And I think that it's brought more flexibility to my life and more understanding, and to not sweat the small stuff, if you will. And then they're having a more enjoyable experience because I'm flexible. Obviously, within reason, we want to keep our students safe. And there is sometimes a really distinct why as to why something can't happen. But sometimes saying yes or doing something is okay too. So flexibility has been a big part.
I love that the curiosity goes both ways and the flexibility goes both ways. All right, friends, again, this is your chance to put some questions, great ideas, suggestions in the chat box. I have one more question, and Andrea, I'm going to start with you. But again, folks, if you've got good practices to share, good questions that you've been wrestling with, now is a wonderful time to bring those forward. Andrea, how did you share Ecuadorian culture at Valley Fair and with your friends and in your community that way? Because this is supposed to go both ways.
Yes, it was very interesting because I wasn't expecting to meet so many people from Ecuador at Valley Fair. So then it became easier because it was a community. So there were different communities of people from all over the place. And I think that's what really made it such a wonderful experience that summer, because we were able to share our foods. We were able, well, in with what we could cook, given the ingredients that we had. But we could share our foods, we could share our music, we could share our customs, our language. And it was like a lived experience between the whole of the dorms that we were in. We had people from Europe, we had people from Asia, from the United States, from South America. So I think that it's just having those moments where we would say, let's cook together, and we would make a barbecue, and everybody would bring something about their country or a food that they like to eat. And that way you start meeting people and their culture and their customs, and who taught you this recipe? Oh, my grandmother. And I think it circles back to my first response, which is the people and their stories. And I think that's how we shared our culture the most.
That's great. Denise, are there things that you do to invite your participants to share their culture with the Americans?
Yes, so I had mentioned we use it as an icebreaker for a lot of our in-services. We do so many team building activities within our facilities because, these students are coming and working, but so are American students. So many people are not coming with a friend network already. So it's a great opportunity to just shift what you might normally do for an icebreaker to include, that cultural component. We also go into local schools, into the local elementary schools, and select some students to give presentations on their country. And that has always gone over really well. And I think it sort of meets two needs. It's sharing culture, the BridgeUSA students are seeing inside a school, which I think they really find, fascinating. And then in addition, we're teaching our local community, what is this program? All these people come every summer. And so from a very early age, they're understanding our workforce needs in a seasonal tourism community and how important this program is to our, to our economics in the area. So it's really helpful in that respect as well. And so the school groups, and then we work with a group called Lunch with Lynch, which is a nonprofit, and he does a lot of wonderful community things, in particular with elementary aged students. So we'll participate in some of their programs and go in and make bookmarks with the kids and write their names in a different language and all types of interactions where they're going not just at the Piers, but to the larger community to share culture.
That's great. Heather, how about in a home setting? Are there good ways to have that in an everyday life setting?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to our students, when they arrive, they have to complete 16 hours of community service. And so they're in the community not only uh, as an exchange student benefiting off of that, but they're also giving back. And so they have to put themselves out there to be able to meet other people, to be able to do these service hours. Additionally, we are very close to three different grant programs that are both funded by American councils as well as mutually funded for one of them. And those students participate in International Education Week, where they're doing presentations as well, very similar to what Denise said, on their home countries. So every opportunity that we have in order for these students to give back and help understand more about their country, we're having them serve in those capacities.
I love that. And there's so many holidays or weeks or festivals that you can link into, whether it's, we just missed my favorite holiday, which is National Donut Day, to International Education Week in the fall. Lots of good ways to find those linkages. One last question for you all. We talked a lot about the successes of what you've done. Everyday interactions, regular trainings, big field trips, all of those kinds of things. Could each of you give me an example of something that totally didn't work and why you think it didn't work to facilitate that exchange? And Heather, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that it's a difficult one to answer because every exchange opportunity is a little bit different. And I think when it comes to our organization, we want them to be successful. So we put so many guide rails in place that if something isn't successful, it's really because it was the choice of either the participant or host family. So when I thought about that question, I'm like, okay, let's think about a time that it didn't work out. And I think what I settled on is when you think of how the international exchange process works, you're meeting a stranger that you've never met in your life with a completely different culture and they're a teenager. You were raised differently. So I think that all exchange organizations across the US can say sometimes it doesn't work. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that it was a bad story. It was just part of their story. So anytime we have to move a student due to incompatibility, I don't want to call it that it wasn't successful, but I think it's kind of an easy answer. But it does happen. And it is always sad when we have to do that because, we try mediation and we try to make those two cultures come together. But at the end of the day, we want the host family and the student to have a positive experience. And sometimes we do have to resort back to saying, is this a healthy environment for both the family and the student? And sometimes the answer is no. And so for the sake of the family and the student, we do have to move them to another family.
Andrea, how about you? Was there something that didn't go the way you expected during your time?
Yes, absolutely. As you were asking that question, a story came to my mind. Because of course, you come from different cultures, you come from different ways of communicating, and I was in the service industry, and sometimes you find people who aren't as polite as you would like them to be. And I'm very sensitive, so I tend to take things very personally. I've grown with age to not do that, but I was 21. It was summer, and there was a woman in the service. I was serving, and she was very direct and quite rude in my experience to how she asked for things. And then I went to talk to one of my colleagues who was from Minnesota. And she then explained more of the cultural aspect, and there would be people that would be asking for things in a way that seemed more rude, but that I shouldn't take it personally. So I think that that's a huge component of going somewhere that you've never been before. You have ways of communicating in your own country that are maybe different from the place that you're going to, especially if you're working with people and serving people, and everything is very fast paced. So I think that that is something that was difficult for me, but that really forged my character and also made me realize that it wasn't necessarily about me. It's also how communication happens between people from different places and how to mend those issues. So that was one, which I think is just it's part of the experience, really.
And what I also love is that your colleague who was from the US was well enough trained and knew enough to respond to that in a positive way and to explain and make it a that curiosity moment instead of just saying, "Oh, why are you complaining about this?" or something along those lines. Denise, how about you? Has there been a thing that didn't go the way you wanted?
I think there are things that are more successful than others, but I wouldn't say there were big failures. But it's constant tweaking. It's always how can we make this better? And so we're always reevaluating it and talking to students and getting feedback. And I would say that I think the participants, but also the Morey's Piers employees, are so thankful for this program and for the opportunity. And I think when we do a cultural event, maybe it didn't go as we planned, but everyone tends to be going into it to have a good time and to learn something and to meet others. And so maybe the cultural part I didn't go as we wanted, but all those other pieces are happening: the team building, the getting to know Americans better, understanding and sharing their own culture. So I think that I think when people go into it with the right attitude, the failures are few and far between, and they're always learning opportunities. What Andrea just said, the experience she had wasn't necessarily a pleasant one, but it was a valuable one. And so I think that that's a big part of the program as well.
Absolutely. And what I appreciate about this whole conversation, thanks to all three of you, is what Denise just talked about, the opportunities for team building and sharing and learning. You all have so well illuminated how they live in all kinds of different things. And there's lots of ways that folks can think about the stuff they already have to do and apply that cultural exchange element to them. So I invite all of you with all of your different roles within the Bridge USA family to think about those things that you have to do anyway, but maybe provide these opportunities for learning and sharing and that cultural exchange piece that we know really separates J1s from so many other opportunities to come to the US. We are basically at time, friends, but I want to end with a comment that Marina Seat from Speedwing put in the chat that I love. And she said, at Speedwing, they always tell students, go with no expectations, as you'll enjoy it more and gain more when you expect the least on the program. And I think it comes from that challenge Andrea gave us about that curiosity mindset rather than assuming that things are going to be one way or another. So as we close out, friends, I just want to ask you to share your insights and evaluation with us. Please let us know through this quick poll about our session here today. Coming up, we're going to have a number of other webinars that I will be announcing soon. We're working on building out our plans for the next several months. So look for lots more information from me. Whenever you need content or are looking for things, the Capital Member Resources folder has handouts, ways of sharing these things, insights from past webinars. It links to all of the previous recordings. So if you want to look at our past conversation with Deputy Assistant Secretary Piscini, or how to reduce visa overstay rates, or how you can make the case in your community that Bridge USA really does advance US national security or its standing in the world, all of that content lives in the member resources section. Again, every Friday we have our member email that goes out. We've just changed systems. So if you didn't get it last Friday, look deep, deep in your spam filters and it may just be there for you. And as we complete the poll, I want to thank all of you for your time, thank our wonderful speakers for their great insights, and thank all of you for the work that you do helping the Bridge USA program deliver not only for the US, but also for all of the wonderful participants who come through this program. So please do fill out this poll really quickly. Look for more information from me about some of our upcoming sessions. And then as always, if you have great content to share, best practices, ideas, things you're struggling with, we always invite that at Capital so that we can help deliver for all of you as you do this great work around the world. So thanks to all of our speakers, thanks to all of our attendees, and have a great rest of your day, everybody.